Good day again for another build vlog or how-to vlog. Uh, Needed in the morning, and it's morning. So good morning. I got a lot of questions about, I've always got a lot of questions about 7Ms and stuff like that and the NAT type deal. Lately, it seems like the 7M itself is, it's becoming harder to find for a lot of people, and it's becoming almost as expensive as an NA2JZ. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of prices of 7M stuff go up. The NA2JZ stuff is still so available that it's cheap. I totally get that's why you guys are looking at it for your NA swaps, or even if you got a blown up turbo car. So we're going to do a blanket type video for everything 2JZ NAT. So how to, which is really simple, kind of some really basic differences between the turbo and NA motors, and some things to look out for maybe if you're buying a car that is a 2JZ NAT car. It's really simple, okay? So everybody knows where you can find a 2JZ NAT. Go on to Kijiji if you're in Canada, go on to Craigslist if you're in the US, or whatever. They're everywhere. IS300s, Aristos, base model Aristos come with them. GS300s in the US, and it goes on and on, right? I mean, you can find one anywhere. You can find an NA2JZ anywhere for about $1,000 US, just $1,000 to $1,200, $1,500 or so if you're in Canada, and it's super simple. Some real basic differences, as you can imagine. Injectors, your 330cc, small, but you can still make power, versus the turbo cars. I know the JDM 2JZs, I believe, are 440 cc's, but the US 2JZ turbo cars were 550. So there's some differences between the turbo versions of the 2JZ. Real quick, I'll cover those. The JDM ones, smaller injectors, ceramic turbo. The US cars, actually the US cars may have had the 440cc injectors as well, just a steel wheel turbo. And the UK version of the turbo 2JZ had actually a different cam profile. I believe that's the one that had 550s and steel wheel turbo. So that was the best version of the Mark IV 2JZ to come out factory. As well, they had super nice glass headlights as opposed to plastic, which we got in North America and in Japan. Regardless, we're getting off topic. So the main differences there are between the 2JZ, the turbo motor, and the NA injectors, like we covered. Head gasket's the biggest thing. The NA head gasket's 0.2 millimeters. So, I mean, it's a piece of hair, right? It's almost non-existent. So that's the big deal. Factory, the turbo motors are 1.6 millimeter. So besides that, the pistons are the next thing, which, I mean, the rods, the crank, everything else in the bottom end minus the pistons is the exact same as the turbo motor. NA compression ratio is 10 to 1. The turbos, I believe, are 8.5 to 1. So if you decide to go NAT, those are the bottom end differences. The head is completely different. I mean, the intake ports are even different. The shape, right? The NAT, or sorry, your NA intake will not bolt to a GTE head, and vice versa. You can't put the GT intake directly on the GE head. Couple internal differences. Well, really, besides those intake ports, the exhaust ports are larger on the NA motor, and the intake ports are larger on the turbo motor. So the head casting's different completely. Short of that, I mean, the guts are kind of the same. There are a lot of little differences, among these engines, but those are the main things. Okay, so your head's different, head gasket's different, your factory electronics are different. whereas the NA2JZ uses MAF, and the US version of the 2JZ turbo motors are Carbon Vortex, like the Turbo 7M, right? JDM versions are MAP. I'm not 100% sure about the UK. It would only make sense that they're a MAP, you know, in my mind being the best version, but I can't, I'm not too sure. It's been a long time. So that's the basic things, right? Now, how to. The how to is as simple as changing brakes. I mean, if you can do your own brakes, you can do this, like we've covered in a lot of other videos. You can buy an NAT turbo kit for almost anything, right? I mean, they're pretty generic. One size almost fits all, depending if the vehicle's right-hand drive or not. You know, you may have some modification to do with your wastegate routing, but that's super minor, right? I mean, you go to Drift Motion, you get an NAT kit. Your factory 330cc injectors will support, you know, 300 to 350 wheel with a fuel pump upgrade at most. Don't you know, if you're running more than 5 pounds, if you have more than a 5-pound gate, in my opinion, you don't have enough fuel. So you should at least be looking into a fuel injector upgrade at that. The factory NA motor at 10-1 at 8 or 9 pounds will make thereabouts 400 wheels. So, you know, that's a fair amount of power. It's dangerous power. It's probably not reliable power unless you run really good fuel. But that's that. My recommendation, 5 pounds, factory fuel system, factory electronics, can be reliable, 5 or 6 pounds for life, forever. Going north of that, that's where you look into your injector upgrade. I mean, you could get a set of, and this is how it works with a 7M. I mean, you could put a set of turbo injectors in for the 7M from an NA and run a resistor. I'm sure it's the same deal with the you know, Mark IV. So look into that. That's probably where I'd go first, because a set of turbo 550 or even 440cc injectors will see you well north of 400 horsepower, and then you run into another crossroads. So after your, you know, 3 to 350 range, the next thing's your injectors and a head gasket. You need to do a head gasket if you want to make over 400 wheel reliably. That, you know, factory head gasket that's in the NA motor is not existent, is not enough. You will detonate that motor if you try to run more than 7 or 8 pounds on it. I guarantee you, from factory, there's a large spike of ignition timing advance around 4,000 RPM. I promise you'll detonate that car. And then you're going to have bigger problems. So the head gasket's a thing. You could go with a factory 2JZ 1.6 millimeter from the turbo motors. I'd recommend putting a 2 millimeter on there. You know, HKS, Cometic, whatever, a good multi-layer, you know, steel 2 millimeter head gasket would probably be the way I go. You probably drop your compression ratio from 10 to 1, 8.6-ish, 8.6, 8.7 to 1, and that's a lot safer. Keep in mind, you still got cast pistons, right? So I mean, they're not hard to melt. So that's it. Your second level, when you want to start cranking the boost, is your head gasket. I recommend the 2 millimeter personally, and you need that fuel injectors at the minimum with your fuel pump upgrade that you've already done. At the very beginning, it's non-negotiable. 255 Walbro at the minimum. Personally, 450 would be the way I'd go. Just because you're doing it anyway, why not have the pump that can flow a little bit more? It's the same money, right? So do your injectors and head gasket after, but very first thing, you get your kit bolted on, you do your fuel pump. An adjustable fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator would be, you know, that goes hand in hand with the pump. Don't try to get away without it. It's just, in my opinion, you need it. And if you want a reliable setup, you need it. So before we go too far too fast, that's it. Those three things. Kit, you can get from anywhere for a couple grand. Fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator, non-negotiable. Done deal. Happy days. 300 to 350 wheel, whatever. It's going to feel great. You're going to have a blast. 400 plus head gasket, injectors. And I'm going to say that 4 to 450 would be your next kind of wall you're going to run into, because the factory electronics with that mass airflow, they won't flow reliably. You're going to have all sorts of messed up stuff happening. It's going to be, you're basically going to be able to not tune it, right? After 450, because it just, that's about your limit for that MAF. It can't take in much more air than that. So past 450, it starts to get expensive, right? You could probably make 350 for 3,500 bucks US or less, especially if you got a good used kit or somebody you trust or whatever. You know, tack on another 1,500 or so US to do the head gasket properly, have your head decked. At that time, do your timing belt and all the maintenance stuff that comes along with this. Again, this is assuming that you have a reliable motor already that you trust. I wouldn't modify something you don't trust. Literally, you're just looking to burn money probably. Just make sure you got something reliable to modify first. So for another 1,500 bucks, you're at that 4 to 450 range with your injectors and your head gasket done. At that point, I'm assuming you're going to have something like an Apexi SAFC to kind of dial in your injectors a little bit. You have the adjustable reg, so you know you don't necessarily need an Apexi SAFC or a piggyback device at that point. You can dial in your stuff with your wideband and adjustable fuel pressure regulator just to, whatever. That's mechanical tuning. It's more, budget orientated, but that's kind of what we're on track here for. So at that 450, no doubt you're about 5,000 bucks US, but that would be a reliable 400 to 450. You know what I mean? For a long time. Fat and happy. Target, high tens, wide open, in terms of your air fuel ratio. I wouldn't want to see anything leaner than 11.5. With the timing, you have no timing control, right? You have no say over any of that. So the more fuel, the better. I mean, the first thing the fuel is coolant to your cylinders. So, you don't want the detonation. You just don't. After 450 is when you start looking into standalone stuff and going map. So you can it's going to be a considerable expense. I mean, I'd budget for at least $2,000 to $2,500 with some tuning. But after that, you can probably, really I've seen NATs make 650 to 700 with fuel and with a turbo upgrade and your standalone for tuning. Your factory intake manifold setup will even float to 750 to 800. So really, for 7,000 bucks, you can, and it's assuming that you have, your turbo sized right for it, you could make north of 600, and it should be reliable if you get somebody to tune it and it's safe. Again, fat and happy. It's not the way to extract every last horsepower, but it's a way to protect your checkbook. So that's kind of that. The basics on how to build it. There's great info out there. Club NAT the forum has a lot of information. Superform, Supramania. I wouldn't necessarily look to Facebook because you get a lot of, don't go to Facebook first to one of the super groups and ask. You just get more opinions than factual stuff. Look to the forums. Don't go to Facebook first. Superforms, NAT, Supramania. You could just even Google NAT Bible. There was an NAT Bible that was stickied in Superforms way back in the day. Everything you need to know to go NAT. Certain steps, precautions, so on and so on. Lots of good information out there. This is just something for you guys to watch. Maybe it's a little easier, faster for you to digest and get some inspiration that it really is a simpler endeavor than you know, you're making it out to be. It can be intimidating to go NAT, put the money out there and take a risk. I know that. So a few things to look for. Well, I mean, if you have a basic understanding of how to go NAT, you kind of know what to look for if you're buying an NAT car. Again, just like the other super videos I've mentioned, make sure the car is not a bucket of bolts. You know, if the guys change something, that they're good, reputable brands. Granted, the cheapest way to bolt a turbo kit is to go to Drift Motion or whatever. I mean, it is not all, you know, the best of the best stuff, but Aaron has all his turbos and stuff rebuilt, so they're going to be reliable for you guys and stuff like that. Yeah, you get the China Manny, you get the China intake charge piping, you get the China intercooler, but again, I mean, the intercooler that's going to come with the kit's probably going to be fairly reliable to that 700 mark. And let's be real, if you're going to make over 700, you basically you know, throwing your budget away. It'll be expensive to make 700 plus reliably, regardless of the engine. So, good quality parts. Vet the car, take it for a ride. Make sure who you're talking to's kind of with it. You can tell, everybody can tell when you're talking to somebody that has first-hand experience with this stuff, how they talk about it. I mean, they just say what they say in confidence. The guy's looking around, he seems nervous, he doesn't really have a straight answer for you in your questions. Probably best just to move on. Or, you know, maybe a shop built the car and he just doesn't know. Get a hold of the shop and ask the shop. Make sure you make a good purchase. So, I mean, that's a lot of information. That's a lot of stuff just to dump on you guys. I don't expect you to, you know, take it all in for what it is. Just on your first time watching this video. Watch it a couple times. I'm sure you'll pick out different things that you didn't hear last time. It's just the way it is. Keep learning, gents, and keep building stuff. I see you guys are watching a lot of theoretical build stuff and a lot of my info dumps. I like that. It's good to see. Catch you guys next time.